No garden's ever static, at least mine isn't. I'm always getting new ideas, some new innovation I want to make, and possibly that's why my interest in growing plants is continuous. Now, I've always wanted a herb garden, and yet never gardened on a soil that suited them, because herbs come from the Mediterranean mostly, from the hot climate, and I've always worked on a heavy clay soil that was wet and badly drained, fine for primulas, but hopeless for herbs. Until now, that is. Now I've got a well-drained soil, and what I'm doing is pegging out an area that I think will suit. I don't want to squidge them up in an out-of-the-way corner. I want to be able to walk down it, because the fragrance from herbs when the leaves are moist. Unless you've walked through a herb garden on a June evening when the dew was beginning to gather, you haven't enjoyed one of gardening's richer experiences. What I'm trying to do is pinch a bit of the garden. This was an odd corner anyway. So by pegging out this, and I think I've got the line right, important that the curve should follow on. What I want to do is bring my herb garden out of here by taking that corner off the lawn and then extend it through to the beech hedge. The bed faces due south. It'll be well drained when I've finished with it. I'm going to leave one or two of the shrubs in to provide shade areas, because there are some herbs which enjoy a little pattern of shade to grow in. And that's got all out that's coming out. I always find it's easier to leave things that you're not quite certain whether they should be there or out, to leave them until you are certain. It's much easier to take it out than to have it to replant. Now, I'm not sure, and I can't be sure, until I've taken that turf off, whether this line is right. And again, I'm erring on the side of taking rather less than I need rather than more, because it's easier to take a little more off than to put a piece back on. But what I'm going to do is nick it out with a half moon with an edging iron, and then square it off and skim it off with a spade. And I decided that even though my soil is very well drained, and even though it is on a slope, my herb garden would look nicer if I put a little wall in and leveled it off. In other words, I'm bringing the whole level up above that of the natural level of the surrounding soil. Drainage will be perfect. I'll get the heads in the sun. And above all, I won't have to stoop my back to sniff the fragrance from the leaves, because that's the beauty of a herb garden. The quality of the aroma that comes from the mixture of leaf tones and from the fragrance that they distill. Will it be worthwhile? I'll tell you when it's finished, but I'm pretty certain it will be. Most important when you start to build a wall of any sort, make sure your footings are sound. And to provide a good firm base, I use the biggest stone. And then get your boot in and really ram it firm, because you're going to lay backers into that to tie the wall into the earth behind. And if the soil below them settles, the whole wall comes down. Make sure that each stone, when you put it in, sits firmly on its bed. Mustn't rock or move about, particularly the lower courses. Use them long ways so the weight of the soil holds them firmly in position. And leave a little bit of batter on the wall. Let it fall back into the bank. rather than trying to build it vertically. If you build it vertically, the weight of the soil behind will push it forward. So, firm foundations, big stone at the end to tie them in, each stone firmly on its bed and running a long ways in like that. And may look a bit rough and ready, but this is York stone area, dry stone wall country. That's the wall of the herb garden finished, and I enjoy doing that as well. But it's raised the general level by 18 inches, and that's fine. But it's left me with a problem. I didn't have enough soil to level it up, and I couldn't find anywhere in the garden, so I've had to import it. It's good quality soil, it's light enough, but there's a little bit of perennial weed in it, like couch grass. But fortunately, I'm going to have to hand work it all back in to level it up. And by working every spadeful by hand, I can pick the wicken grass out. Because it's no good putting anything into a garden if there are perennial weeds there. Get rid of them so you've got a clean start, and that makes it easier to maintain. And this is where buying the plants early and growing them on proves really worthwhile. Yes, I've had the problem of watering them and caring for them, but it's given me a good-sized plant to work with, because I design a herb garden exactly as I design any other part of the garden. I want to put the framework in first. I know what sort of background I want. I know I want greys and greens and glaucous greens, and then I can paint the colours in front of them. Because a herb garden should be like any other part of the garden. It should give you interest for as many months as possible. And first, the rosemary. Well, there are several different sorts of rosemary. That one flowers earlier. This one flowers a little later, is in more upright. And what I want to do is have the one that flowers early tucked under the shelter of the hedge, the one that flowers a little bit later out where it'll catch the sun, because these are plants of the sunshine. And using the berberis, strangely enough, berberis are a herb. Well, not strangely, because they used to be grown for the fruit. They made jam at one stage of the fruit. And sage, well, everybody knows the fragrance of sage. Now, you imagine the scent of sage and then the scent of the rosemary and the scent of lavender, not as individuals, but all together in a sort of garden potpourri. Several different sorts of sage. This is the golden leaf form, and even in the golden leaf form, you get different foliage types. Now, they really are plants of the sun. And the lavender, well, I've got lots of lavender because I want to group it each end of the border. That's Hidcote. I think that's the best one, but there are so many different varieties. There's Hidcote and there's Twickle Purple and Stoic Gaze, and the common English lavender, which isn't so common in my book. I want the smell of lavender at both ends of the border. That's why I've got so much. Lovely. Had a lavender hedge in my first garden, and I've never forgotten how delightful that was. The group there. Sheltered by the hedge on summer evening, I can come and sit there and enjoy that. Boy, it's going to look all right. And then the Santolina, the little cotton lavender. Used in potpourri, and they used to strew it on the floor before they invented carpets. It has its own very pungent aroma, Santolina. Lovely foliage shrub with yellow flowers too in due course. And hyssop, well, hyssop has a very pungent aroma, and they used to make tea of it, and I only tried it once. It's a wee bit too strong for my taste. But there's a flat stone down there, so I'll plant it near that so I can enjoy the aroma. That's it, that's the bones of the gardening. Now I'll go back and get another load. That is a barrel load of beautiful plants. They're smaller, they're more intimate. You've got to look at them closely, so I'm going to use them along the front of the border. But I'm not going to use them indiscriminately. I'm still going to build up the patterns, like an embroidery. For example, the thyme. I would grow the thyme just for one reason, and that is because on a hot summer day the bees gather to it and you get that undertone of noise that is a proper accompaniment to a real warm summer's day. And rue. Well, I'm told that rue, an infusion of rue leaves drunk just before you go to bed, is a cure for nightmares, and there's sometimes I could have used that. But the blue foliage form is a very, very attractive plant. And you put the blue against a grey leaf plant, like the Senecio there. And I've got my purple foliage sage to go in with the yellow foliage forms. I've got some other coloured sages too, but I'm going to put those in shade. And always in a herb garden you've got to have pinks. I know that you only use the flowers in potpourri. They have no medicinal value, but they're so lovely, the warm fragrance, the clovey scent of pink. And I'm going to use the variety that's, what, 200 years old? That's got to be cottage garden. Balm, the balm of Gilead. I know as a schoolboy that when we cut ourselves badly, one of the first things we went for were balm leaves to rub on it. Now, I'm not sure whether it did any good, but I'm sure that somewhere we'd been told that it was good for open wounds. It's also said to be a very soothing drink. And the Anthemis. You can make lawns of Anthemis nobilis, chamomile. You can walk on it, you can sit on it. The more you crush it, the more the fragrance comes out. And it does make a very pleasant tisane, an afternoon tea. But always, whenever you're gardening, you think, what context do I put them in? What suits the plant best? The one thing for sure that I'm not going to do, and that is plant the collection of mints, all the different forms of mints that I've got, directly into the soil. Because immediately you put garden mint into good soil, wham, it's all over the border. So what I do with that is I've got some old clay pots, and I plunge those in the garden so the rim is about 2 inches above soil level. And I plant the mint into that, and I've got them in a corral I can't get out. And all you've got to do then is top dress them 1 year, and then every second year lift and divide and replant. And you've got them confined, but you've got the beauty of the foliage, and you've got that really piquant flavour from the leaves. Plus the fact that we like mint when we're having lamb. We like it with new potatoes too. So I'm growing the new potatoes and I've got the mint there ready. And ladslove, well, there's always got to be a plant of ladslove herb garden I designed, because there was a big bush of it growing in the garden of my childhood home, and when I came home from school I used to pull a sprig and crush it between my fingers and sniff that very, very pungent aroma. It's a fairly big, tall growing plant, so it wants to go back in the border, but not so far back that I can't get that crisp, acrid fragrance from the foliage. And the golden leaf balm, which is just like a patch of sunshine even on a dull day, needs to be in shade in full sun. The foliage tends to brown and burn up. So I'm putting it in with the purple leaf berberis in the background. Now the ordinary plain-leaved kind of balm can go in full sun. And I want to get the scent of the foliage mingling with that of the lavender in front of it. This is the great idea in a herb garden of not only getting foliage contrast, flower contrast, but getting the various scents to mingle together. And the last plant, the Cichuria montana, the winter savoury, that has lovely blue flowers in the autumn. And against the golden sage there, it should look most effective. Well, that's the ground plan laid, and it's most important to do it like this, to put the plants out, and then you can see whether you've got your proportions right, whether you've got the height in the right place, whether you've painted the right sort of foliage pattern. Now it's just plain, honest-to-goodness gardening. Getting the plants into the soil as quickly as possible before the roots dry out too much. The aftercare is a wee bit different because some herbs like a moister soil than others. So I go around, and that's part of the joy of gardening, going round afterwards, quietly in the evening, and mulching up the things that need an extra bit of moisture. I prefer planting with a trowel, even with shrubs as big as this. Plant to the depth of the soil in the container. In other words, they don't go on any deeper than that. But where they've got onto a bit of a bare leg, if you look at that, young shoots coming from low down. Now I can put that plant down, about an inch and a half, 2 inches deeper into the soil. And all those young shoots will root, and I'll have that much stronger growth on top. Ah, that's right. That is the right depth, see? Just about an inch below the level of the soil, so that when I backfill, the base of those stems, just bury it. Take the label off, because once you've got the plants in the garden, if they're worth planting, then they're worth knowing, so you don't need a label to know them by. A beautiful thing, the fragrance of lavender. And putting plants in the walls is always a good idea, especially things like the Arinus that'll seed themselves. And when I was building the wall, I left that stone on purpose with 2 little chocks in like that. It's a bit brutal when you do it, but I'm quite happy. Once the stone goes in place, it naturally holds a lot of moisture. A gardener's boot is a very handy weapon. And fill the cracks between the stones in with good soil, because when the plant does set seed, they'll sow into these crevices. And very soon, you'll have a wall that's a mass of flowers. And that is a Rhinus alpinus. Not really a herb, but it's such an attractive little plant that it's a pity not to include it. Well, that's it, the bones of the herb garden in. And looking at it, never mind the bones, there's enough plants in there to say, well, it's an attractive garden. I know there's 1 or 2 spaces, because in my garden the constant thought is shelter. And some of the herbs I want to grow do need shelter. And I'm not cheating, because juniper berries have been used in medicine for many, many years. And yet when I look at that crop of the berries, I think I might be in the market myself, because it does produce a prodigious amount. But that, in any case, is a lovely foliage plant. My big problem is going to be getting that out of the container. No, it isn't. Well, if ever a hole was made to measure, that one's it. It's exactly the right size, with the soil ball about an inch below the finished level. And the thing that I've got to do now, because the root ball is fairly well packed, is make sure the soil around it is packed almost as tightly. Otherwise I'm going to have a pool of water there when it rains. So, yeah, I know that conifer cost me quite a bit of money, but when I see the improvement that it's made to the herb garden, with every penny, no question in my mind, that's an investment that's going to grow and grow in beauty. And that's one of the bonuses of gardening, that, yes, it costs a bit, but the value grows with the passage of time. Each part of the garden is designed to contribute something to the overall pleasure that I take in just being amongst the plants. And with the herb garden, it's two-dimensional. I've got the quality of the leaf and the flower, but above all I've got the fragrance. And quite often, before I come and sit on the wall like this, I'll just damp the foliage over and let the sun bring out all the different odours from the leaves. It's sort of a living bouquet. Can I suggest, if you're going to make a herb garden, either put a low wall or a seat somewhere convenient, because to get the full benefit from herbs, you've got to sit amongst them on a warm summer evening. That's proper gardening.